framing done. We'll be able to fit right there. Oh! Let me come on over. So, what may I have been doing right there? Well, I'm getting ready to frame my next great masterpiece. The next most beautiful thing I've ever seen on anime ever made. And I'm here to talk to you guys as to why you guys should be finding a special spot on the wall to display to everybody the greatest anime that may have ever been made. I'm here to talk to you guys about the most recent anime that is currently in release right now called Mushoku Tensei. Now, for anybody who hasn't seen Mushoku Tensei or doesn't know anything about it, it is probably the next greatest isekai anime to ever come out, to ever be seen, to ever be worked on, possibly developed. And it is quite the amazing masterpiece. And you know, it's funny because I keep talking about, you know, what is the greatest isekai ever made, or what's the next best masterpiece. Well, I definitely had some pretty strong opinions about it for Ray Zero, which I, haven't really done any videos, but here and there I have talked about it on streams. But I'm here to talk to you guys about what makes Mushoku Tensei possibly the greatest isekai anime of all time, and why you need to go out and probably see it for yourself, and possibly even think about saving some space on the wall behind to frame it so that everybody can know your true passion and true love for a genuine masterpiece such as Mushoku Tensei. Mushoku Tensei is an amazing work of art within the isekai the isekai genre, that is just absolute genius within every single little itty bit of any kind of storytelling they do. They develop you a incredibly well set up setting. They have a in-depth world with much world building. It has timelines. There's plenty of information to go around. And they have extremely deep characters with the most human qualities that I have ever seen in any kind of character ever written for any kind of anime story I've ever seen in my life. Now, overall, we have these extremely human characters that really drive each other to be the best that they can be, no matter what kind of flaws they have. We have the main character, whose name is Rudeus Greyrat, who is possibly the most deepest and human-like character that I have ever seen in an anime, ever. Rudeus Greyrat is I think he's in his if I remember correctly, he is in his 30s. He is a neat otaku who basically was a failure in his life. He played video games all day. He watched anime all day. He was obsessed with just, hentai and anime and video games and nothing else. And as you get to know him as a character from his past life, he lived a very sad, tragic life where he didn't get out to do much or spend time with the people that truly mattered, and that really followed him all through his life. It caused him to not have very good relationships with people, and even have really broken ties with his own family. It also grew him into being a person who suffered from a lot of traumatic experiences in his life. He was afraid to go outside, he was afraid to interact with people, he just overall had a really rough time, and it makes him so fascinating. Eventually he gets to a point where he dies in a car accident. Somebody hits him with a truck. He, had a moment of mortality where he saw somebody who was in danger of getting hit by a truck, and he leaps in and he saves that person, and it causes him his own death. And he, in turn, is reborn into the baby body of Rudeus Greyrat. And man, oh man, when he's reborn, he remembers everything. And that is quite an interesting plot point that they take right from the beginning within the show, is they want to make sure that you remember that he is a old man in his 30s who is reborn into a baby's body, and he's got every single memory, and man oh man does he get into a lot of shenanigans. In fact, a lot of the intrigue that starts in the very beginning of the show is just watching him be a little tiny baby boy, and it's really actually clever how the show presents this. It actually shows us the kind of intriguing and hilarious shenanigans that a normal little baby child could get into. But it's so funny when you see it as being this old man who is, got a very mature sense of understanding the world. He's an adult, and man, is he horny, that's for sure. And let me tell you guys, this show revolves around horniness. Now, I know that sounds kind of sketchy because I went from talking about a little baby boy and then immediately talking about how all these characters are very obsessed with, sexual interaction, and that does happen a lot in the show. But the way that the show presents it is so realistic and human and totally believable, and they do a pretty good job at making it not very sketchy. There's definitely some moments where you're kind of questioning what's going on and you're a little unsure, but the overall presentation of how it is given to us, over the pacing and the development of, the adult mentality within this young child, it's just hard to dismiss it. It's hard to have any kind of problems with it, because you can definitely kind of understand that he's still an adult and he's still having to learn, and he's just lucky enough to even have a second chance. And being able to truly understand and recognize the very human characteristics and emotional drive and, the things that the main character experienced as a human being on Earth before being reborn into this small child is just deeply fascinating. It's genuinely a human character study. And that's just not true for Rudeus himself as he's growing up. In fact, you see it in every single individual character. I'm talking about every single character within this story is in their own right learning and growing and developing like a real human being growing up obviously the world that they're growing up in is this fantastic, crazy fantasy world. But they still have very human drives and very human emotions and very human mentalities and human logic. And being able to watch these characters in this fantasy world but have these very human drives, it makes you feel like that you can truly connect with all the characters. You have, they over time introduce other characters, quite a few women, obviously. But, they have the girls that he grows up with and learns to be with, and also in a very questionable fashion, falls in love with. Or so it's kind of slightly presented to us that way. But it is a little questionable, because a lot of these children are not adults, because they're clearly children, and it's very much a little questionable. It tends to be a bit questionable, but overall, it's very wholesome. It is very wholesome. And and that's not even the best part about it, is that you don't just get to see these children grow up and be children and learn to cope with the world around them. In fact, actually, some of the deeper and more fascinating intrigue to the show is the adult characters. Because just like the, children growing up and learning to be children, growing up in this, having to understand the world around them and learn hard lessons and be in a brutal fantasy world where, by the way, people die, and it is very graphic, and it is very well done, and it is incredibly just immersive and fascinating watching how the individual characters kind of react to death and, crime and things like that. Like I said, incredibly artistic and beautifully well done, world developing, character developing, just, really taking a two-dimensional character in a story and just fleshing them out in the most beautiful three-dimensional way possible, where you could legitimately believe that these are real people. But on top of them, the children, which are clearly the majority of the main characters, you have these adults, very, very, mature adults. And I'm talking about the parents of the main character, the mother and the father, which have a very, very in-depth and very realistic relationship between one another, as well as the various different obstacles that the family has to go through emotionally, personally, living their lives like a real, human family would in real life. Like, I mean, you kind of learned that, his father, like the main character's father, is a bit of a womanizer. And you find that, his mother is, very caring and loving, and all the, like I said, you have these children with questionable situations, sure, but the other part too is you have these adults with very realistic adult, relationships and, sexuality and emotions and just living their lives like real human beings. It's absolutely fascinating. You would almost think you were reading about the biographies of real people when you're watching how some of these characters are developed in this show. It's fascinating. And the thing is, too, that even makes it more amazing is that you learn that every character has their dark side to them. Every character kind of has their, like, they all have their good qualities, sure, and they all have their ability to care about one another and love one another, but you also learn that they're also flawed human beings that live these, lives where they make mistakes and they do the wrong thing and they try their hardest, but they don't they're not perfect people. And that's genuinely what makes them so fascinating. It makes you want to know more. Like even the characters that you wouldn't expect to be super important to the storyline have these incredibly deep backgrounds and deep stories, and they talk about what they did in the past and like how his mother and his father met and why they fell in love, and you learn about the people that they worked with and the adventures they went on. And that's not even the main focal point of the story, but it's important to know so that you can get a better grasp on why his family is the way that they are and why they raise the main character the way that they do, and the overall lessons that they teach him through time. And you even get to see the main character even have to go through real life situations, in the sense of dealing with his parents, and based on the idea of a child dealing with child problems and then being misunderstood by his parents, and then how he has to deal with that and how his parents have to deal with that. And it's really just overall this amazing work of art. It truly is. It's a deep study into what feels like real human psychology. You can, there's never a moment where you feel like that the characters are made of cardboard, or that they're fake, or they're just serving some sort of narrative, or playing a stereotypical isekai protagonist in a stereotypical isekai world where he's overpowered because we want to live that power fantasy. You even get to take the time to watch the characters grow, and you get to watch them grow into being very powerful people. But it takes time, it takes development, it takes hard lessons that have to be learned by each individual character. And they do make improvements and they do grow, and you can watch that as they walk the path that they live, they will become insanely powerful. But the thing is that unlike a lot of other isekais where they just kind of hand you over on a silver platter an overpowered main character, it's not in this particular isekai. It's not necessarily about the destination. It's about the journey to the destination. And that's really what makes it such a fantastic anime. So I have to present to you guys the idea that you need to go and see Mushoku Tensei if you're not already watching it. It is an artistic masterpiece. I think that it will be remembered for a very long time, and I am curious to see how long it will go on. I believe that it is currently scheduled for a full 23 episodes, I believe. And I've just never seen anything like it. And I would even declare that, you know, if I could ever possibly consider that, you know, anime can truly be considered to be artwork, you know, something that could be presented in a museum, I would have to argue that Mushoku Tensei is one of those animes that I would go out of my way to take measurements on my wall so that I could find a way to frame an entire anime right there on the back wall, because it's a masterpiece. And, you know, if you love anime and you love fantasy and you love Isekai, this is one that you literally cannot afford to miss. So I would actually heavily recommend anybody who might be in my audience, or anybody who's not quite in my audience but is just happens to find this video to find some more information about a great anime, I would ask that you go out and you try and watch Mushoku Tensei and experience it for yourself. And I really think that you're going to be surprised by how amazing it is, and how much it you know, it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You're going to be surprised by how well it vibes with you. I think that you'll find it very surprising that the characters, they feel like human beings. They feel like they're living human lives, and they feel like that, you know, you can understand them on an emotional capability and an emotional, you know, level and things like that. So go out, watch Mushoku Tensei. You can't afford to miss it. I'm Mr. Habanero. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to give a special shout out to my wonderful Patreon members, because I can say words, which include ya boy Lettuce, Bo Falcon, Fajouk Enterprises, James P., Miss Rebecca, and Mr. Shed. So thank you, Patreon members. You guys rock, and you allow me to create content like this. So all my Patreon members, go out and watch Mushoku Tensei, and everybody who's not a Patreon member, go out and watch Mushoku Tensei. If you enjoyed this video, please think about liking, commenting, and subscribing, and hitting that notification bell. Check in the description below for my various different links. Other than that, Mr. Habanero, signing out. Thanks so much, guys. See you later.